She is dressed perfectly. Blue tailored suit, black velvet hat, a fox fur muff to keep out the December cold. She buys chocolates, she buys a book. She waves to a friend on Fifth Avenue and says she is walking home through Central Park. TV. Then she vanishes, and her family waits 6 full weeks before telling the police. Vocal media. 6 weeks, not 6 hours, not 6 days, 6 weeks. So here is the question that has haunted New York City for over 100 years, and the question we are not going to answer just yet. Did the family wait because they were grieving? Or did they wait because they already knew exactly where she was? Her name was Dorothy Harriet Camille Arnold, and from the very first day of her life, the world had already decided what she was for. She was born into one of Manhattan's most powerful dynasties, a family with roots tracing back to the Mayflower, and an uncle who sat on the United States Supreme Court. National Geographic, the Arnolds did not simply have money. They had position, they had legacy, and that legacy came with a price that Dorothy would spend her entire short life paying. The first tragedy was quiet, the kind that leaves no bruises. Dorothy attended Bryn Mawr College in Pennsylvania, where she studied literature and language. The history inside her, she was sharp. She was ambitious. She graduated and came home burning with a single dream: she wanted to be a writer. Not a wife, not a decoration at a dinner party, a writer. She submitted her stories to McClure's magazine, one of the most respected publications in America. Her family, largely amused by her writing aspirations, teased her about the rejections. AETV not gently, not privately. They mocked her at the dinner table she was trapped at every night. So Dorothy did something quietly heartbreaking. She rented a secret post office box so her family could not intercept the rejection letters. National Geographic, she was so ashamed of failing at the one thing she loved, that she hid her wounds from the people who had already told her she would never succeed. The second tragedy cut even deeper. Dorothy asked her father for one thing, not money, not jewels. She asked for permission to move into her own apartment in Greenwich Village, an area known for its vibrant artist community. The history inside her, she wanted space to write, space to breathe, space to become someone. Her father Francis forbade it, telling her that a good writer can write anywhere. National Geographic, what he meant was simpler and crueler than that. A good daughter stays home. A good daughter stays visible. A good daughter stays controlled. Dorothy was 25 years old, a college graduate, an heiress in her own right, and she was not allowed to choose her own address. She wrote to her secret lover in one of her final letters, "Failure stares me in the face. All I can see is a long road with no turning." AETV. That is not the letter of a woman who has everything. That is the letter of a woman who has been told her entire life that everything she wants is wrong. And somewhere in that silence, in that house on East 79th Street, something was building. Something the Arnold family would spend the next century making sure nobody ever found out. By the autumn of 1910, Dorothy Arnold had found 2 reasons to keep going. One was secret, one was stolen. And both of them would be destroyed before winter arrived. The first rise. His name was George Griscom, Jr. He was 42 years old to her 25. He came from a wealthy Pennsylvania family. He was an engineer. He had a reputation for poor character and a broken engagement to another heiress. Hub pages, none of that mattered to Dorothy. What mattered was that George Griscom saw her, not as a family ornament, not as a future wife to be managed. He corresponded with her. He listened to her. He was the one person in her world who did not laugh at her dreams. For Dorothy Arnold, that was everything. The first collapse. Her parents strongly disapproved of him. In September 1910, just months before she vanished, Dorothy pawned her own jewelry and used the money to fund a secret week-long trip to Boston with Griscom, staying at the Hotel Essex. Vocal media, she lied to her family. She told them she was visiting a college friend in Cambridge. For 7 days, she was free. Then her parents found out, and they ended it. The letters she sent to Griscom, some of them intimate, were later found by her brother and reportedly burned to preserve the family's dignity. Vocal media. Not Dorothy's dignity, the family's dignity, her words, her private heart. Fed into a fireplace so the Arnold name would stay clean. The second rise. Dorothy did not collapse after that. She steadied herself. She turned back to the one thing that was entirely hers, her writing. She finished a second short story. She titled it The Poinsettia Flames. She poured herself into it. She submitted it to McClure's in November 1910. Wikipedia, this time she was sure. This time the story was better. This time the answer would be different. She waited. The second collapse. That story was also rejected. According to Arnold's friends, the second rejection left her dejected and embarrassed. Wikipedia. One sentence, one envelope. One word no, and the last door she believed in swung shut. In her final letter to Griscom, she wrote, "Failure stares me in the face. All I can see is a long road with no turning. Mother will always think an accident has happened." TV. Read that again slowly. Mother will always think an accident has happened. Dorothy Arnold wrote those words weeks before she disappeared. She was not describing fear. She was not describing grief. She was describing something she had already decided, the third rise. On the morning of December 12, 1910, something shifted. Dorothy was in good spirits. She dressed to the height of New York fashion. National Geographic, she charged chocolates to her father's account, walked 32 blocks to a bookstore, bought a collection of short stories, and stepped back out onto Fifth Avenue. AETV, a friend spotted her at the corner of Fifth Avenue and 27th Street. The friend described Dorothy as carefree and in good spirits. AETV. For one brief, bright moment on a cold December afternoon, Dorothy Arnold looked like a woman who had made peace with something. The third collapse. She turned toward Central Park, and the city swallowed her whole. Despite widespread coverage, hundreds of leads, and even a public reward, Dorothy Arnold was never found. Vocal media, but here is what we need to sit with before we move forward. The family knew she was missing that evening. They felt it at the dinner table the moment her chair stayed empty. And they did not report her missing for 6 full weeks. All that's interesting. 6 weeks in which evidence cooled, trails went dark, witnesses forgot. 6 weeks in which the Arnold family made phone calls but not to the police. So who exactly were they calling? ACT4, the suspicious web. When a 25-year-old heiress vanishes from Fifth Avenue in broad daylight, the first call goes to the police. Unless you have something to hide. Frances Arnold contacted John S. Keith, a friend and private attorney, on December 13, 1910. The very next morning, Hub Pages, not the New York Police Department, not the district attorney. A personal lawyer whose first loyalty was to the Arnold family name, not to Dorothy. Keith went directly to Dorothy's bedroom. He found nothing missing but the clothes she had been wearing. He found personal letters on her desk, foreign postmarks, 2 folders for transatlantic ocean liners, and burned papers in the fireplace. Hub Pages. Burned papers in a missing woman's bedroom on the day after she disappeared. Keith's explanation was tidy. The family believed the burned papers were Dorothy's rejected manuscripts. Hub Pages. A grieving father, they said, simply tidying up. But ask yourself this: what kind of father in the first hours of his daughter's disappearance thinks to burn anything at all? Then came the Pinkerton Detective Agency. The Arnolds hired the renowned Pinkerton Detective Agency, which searched for Dorothy in the United States and Europe. AETV, the Pinkertons were not a charity. They were expensive, discreet, and famous for doing exactly what wealthy clients needed done, quietly. They did not report to the public. They did not report to the press. They reported only to Frances Arnold. For 6 weeks, the most powerful private investigation firm in America searched for Dorothy Arnold and shared every single finding exclusively with the family that may have had the most to gain from her silence. The NYPD was not informed until December 22nd, 10 full days after Dorothy vanished. AETV. 10 days of evidence, gone. Then there was George Griscom Jr. When Dorothy failed to return home, the family sent Griscom a telegram in Florence, Italy on December 16th. Vocal media 4 days before they told the police. They contacted her secret lover, the man they had forbidden her to see, before they contacted a single law enforcement officer. ACT5, the villain reveal. We have been taught to feel sorry for Frances Arnold, the grieving father, the broken patriarch, the man who told reporters he would spend every last dollar he owned to avenge his daughter's death. It is time to look at that story differently. Frances Arnold was not a man undone by grief. He was a man running an operation. From the very first night Dorothy failed to come home, Frances made a series of decisions that had nothing to do with finding his daughter, and everything to do with protecting what the Arnold family had built across generations. Wanting to avoid a media circus, the Arnold family did not report Dorothy missing until 6 weeks after she vanished. All that's interesting: 6 weeks in which Frances Arnold sat in his mansion on East 79th Street, fielding private updates from Pinkerton detectives, consulting his personal attorney, and deciding every single day that the public did not need to know. That was not grief. That was management. But the cruelest thing Francis Arnold did was not the silence. It was what he did to Dorothy's voice long before she ever disappeared. When Dorothy asked to move into her own apartment in Greenwich Village, Francis forbade it. National Geographic A-grown woman, a college graduate, forbidden from choosing where she lived. That alone was brutal enough. But Francis went further. When Dorothy's intimate letters to George Griscom were discovered, her own brother took them and burned them. Vocal media every word Dorothy had written in private, every feeling she had trusted to paper. Destroyed, not to protect Dorothy, the family was explicit about their reasoning. It was done to preserve the Arnold family's dignity. Dorothy's inner life was treated as a threat to be eliminated. Her words were ash before she was even declared missing. Everything we have examined so far points in one direction. A controlling family, a silenced daughter, a 6-week delay, burned letters, hidden clues. A police captain who announced the case was solved and then mysteriously recanted. You would be forgiven for thinking you now understand what happened to Dorothy Arnold. You do not. Because in 1916, 6 years after Dorothy vanished, a man opened his mouth in a prison cell in Rhode Island. And what he said has never been fully explained, fully investigated, or fully put to rest. His name was Edward Glennorris. He was a convicted felon, imprisoned at the time for attempted extortion. Wikipedia, he had nothing left to lose and nothing obvious to gain. And he told investigators a story so specific, so detailed, so precisely placed in time that it could not be easily dismissed. Glennorris claimed he had been paid $250 to bury the body of a young woman in December 1910. He said an acquaintance known only as Little Louie hired him to drive the woman from a home in New Rochelle to West Point, New York. In New Rochelle, Glennorris said that he and Little Louie were met by 2 men, one known only as Doc, and another whom Glennorris described as wealthy and well-dressed. Wikipedia, wealthy and well-dressed. In December 1910, in New Rochelle, New York, moving an unconscious woman in the dead of winter. During the drive, Little Louie told Glennorris that the woman was Dorothy Arnold. Wikipedia, now here is where this story fractures into something darker than a simple disappearance. Glennorris claimed the man known as Doc told him the woman had died during an operation at a private home in West Point. The History Insider, an operation in a private home, not a hospital, not a clinic, a home. In an era when one particular kind of operation was performed in secret in private homes by men called Doc, because the women who needed it had no other choice. The theory that Dorothy Arnold died during a botched abortion had circulated since the earliest days of her disappearance. Some speculated that she had died of a botched abortion, but there was never any evidence to substantiate the claim. Investigation discovery, until Glennorris, a man with no proven connection to the Arnold family, a man who named specific locations, specific payments, a specific date. A man who gave investigators a story that matched the timeline of Dorothy's disappearance with uncomfortable precision. Police searched several homes in the area based on Glennorris's account. They found no remains. The History Insider, but finding nothing is not the same as proving nothing happened. And now we arrive at the name that changes the shape of this entire story. George Griscom Jr. We have spoken about him already. Dorothy's forbidden lover, the older man her family despised, the man who was conveniently vacationing in Florence, Italy when Dorothy disappeared, the man who refused to return to New York to face investigators directly. Griscom claimed that he had received letters from Dorothy even after her disappearance, though none were ever produced publicly. Hub pages. Letters he received that he never showed anyone. That may have contained information that could have changed everything. George Griscom Jr. died without ever giving a full public account of his relationship with Dorothy Arnold, without ever explaining those letters. Without ever explaining what was said when the Arnold family crossed an ocean to meet him privately in Florence. He carried whatever he knew into the ground with him. But here is the layer that sits beneath even Griscom. If Dorothy Arnold died during a private medical procedure, if Doc was real, if Little Louie was real, if the house in West Point was real, then someone arranged it. Someone paid for it. Someone knew she was pregnant, or believed she was, and someone made a decision about what happened next. And that someone had to have known Dorothy's situation intimately. Her family claimed they knew nothing of any pregnancy. They pointed to Griscom. The public pointed to Griscom. Every theory eventually pointed to Griscom, but consider this. Dorothy's brother found her intimate letters to Griscom and burned them immediately. Hub pages, a brother who moved so fast to destroy evidence that investigators never saw a single word Dorothy had written. What exactly was in those letters that required burning within hours of her disappearance? What did the Arnold family already know? Before the Pinkertons, before the attorney, before the telegrams to Florence? That made the destruction of Dorothy's private correspondence the very first order of business. That question has no answer. The letters are ash, the brother is dead, Griscom is dead. Doc was never identified, little Louis was never found, and the Arnold family for over a century has declined to look too hard at any of it. Dorothy's great-niece, Jane Vollmer, said, "My grandmother would be absolutely horrified to have all this dug up 100 years later, but maybe it's time someone told the truth." National Geographic. Maybe it is, but the people who knew the truth made very certain it would die with them.